Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at EX4, and EX4 offers us lots of new and powerful tools to be able to build and iterate on some new and existing decks. And today's deck I'm going to be taking a look at is going to be a brand new iteration on the Gaogamon deck. So the Gaogamon deck is, like Shine Greymon and Bravemon, an incomplete deck. We're still missing some core parts and pieces to make this deck even more competitively viable. But with EX4, we do have enough parts and pieces to at least flesh out what we had from BT11 to make an even more powerful and cohesive deck than we had before. So as far as the whole goal on what MirageGaogamon is trying to do, it is kind of this weird aggro control style of deck where we're trying to bounce the opponent's cards into their hand and try to fill up their hand as much as we possibly can, and then utilize our card effects to take advantage of the fact that they have a large hand size to do various different things with. So with all that said and done, let's just dive right into the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm only going to be running 4 copies of Wanyamon. So if you wanted to run a 5th Digi-Egg, you can. The whole goal and intention of our Digi-Eggs is just to help us try to draw some cards, and Wanyamon is one of the best generic draw engines that we have, interacting with the fact that we're going to already want to play with our blue tamers. Next, on to the rookies, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Syakomon. So Syakomon is a tech or flex spot in the deck, and it could really be anything you want it to be. I'm just utilizing the fact that we have the space to run extra rookies that are not on brand with the deck, so I'm going to be delegating those spaces to some floodgates to try to slow down the opponent for specific actions. Syakomon is stopping them from reducing their Digivolution costs, so that way we could try to make their cards as inefficient as we possibly can against certain matchups. And the same sentiment is true with running 2 copies of ModokiBetamon, so that way we could kind of use the rookie floodgate that we want in the given matchups that they're good against. So ModokiBetamon is trying to stop the opponent from gaining memory outside of their tamer effects, really limiting their memory manipulating shenanigans. But both of the rookie floodgates, again, could be any level 3 that you want it to be. And then as far as the more inline level 3s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gaomon. So this is the BT11 version of Gaomon, and this is going to be the deck's main consistency tool, acting as a really good searcher, allowing us to try to dig out our Gaogamons and our blue tamers, on top of the fact that we're going to be utilizing the card to try to bounce the opponent's rookies back into their hand when we're aggressing with our mid to high level Digimon, not only to try to fill up their hand, but to control the field at the same time. And then the last rookie of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gaomon. So this is the EX4 version of Gaomon, and the on-play ability does help with our consistency as well as the opponent's. We're mostly using it to try to help fill up the opponent's hand to try to trigger some of our various abilities. But the draw power isn't necessarily the most important aspect of the card, more so than its inheritable ability, which is where we want to utilize this card more often than not, because when we're adding cards to the opponent's hand, so when we're bouncing cards back to their hand with our card effects, then we're going to be gaining a memory by doing so to try to make our plays as tempo efficient as we can possibly make them. Next, on to the champions, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Kumamon. So Kumamon is another tech or flex spot for the deck. I do like running hybrids in this style of deck just because we are playing around with tamers, so we could use the fact that we can use our tamers as basically an extra point of Digivolution, or more importantly, an alternate win condition when we're able to break all of the opponent's security. Then this could just be a surprise attack out of nowhere. Kumamon could be any other hybrid that you want to run, but I do like the fact that we could still try to trash the opponent's inheritables and control the field a little bit differently, so that way we could try to make the opponent's cards as inefficient as we possibly can. But as far as the more inline level 4s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Gaogamon. So this is the BT11 version of Gaogamon, and it has a pretty okay when attacking ability of it being able to gain a memory if the opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand. This is really important to pair up with the jamming ability, so that way we could try to make our swing as safe as we possibly can, and to be able to gain that tempo. Then the inheritable ability is doing exactly the same type of thing as what we just saw with the the BT11 Gaomon, where it's just trying to allow us to have alternative ways at being able to bounce the opponent's Digimon back to their hand. This is still targeting level 3s, so it allows us to be able to customize our stack a little bit cleanly, having redundancy on these types of abilities at different levels. And then the last level 4 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of Gaogamon. So this is the EX4 version of Gaogamon, and this has a nice when digivolving ability to be able to bounce a rookie back to the opponent's hand, so that way we don't need to waste our time trying to swing and be able to bounce the opponent's Digimon that way. We're just doing it going up our line. Then on top of that, it also has a nice inheritable ability that's doing the exact same thing as what we just saw with the EX4 Gaomon, where it's just allowing us to be able to be as tempo efficient with our cards when we're trying to bounce the opponent's cards back into their hand. And then when it comes to the level 5s, we do have enough MachGaogamons to be able to run 8 MachGaogamons to fill out what the level 5s can do, and they still have some pretty decent tech and utility to them. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of the BT11 MachGaogamon. So this is going to be the main defensive card for the deck, just because we're going to be gaining blocker and a nice DP boost for every 4 cards in the opponent's hand when we digivolve up into this card. Then on top of that, the inheritable ability is super important for the deck to try to be as aggressive as we can possibly be if we want to, or we could utilize the fact that the Digimon has blocker for the turn, just because when we're adding cards to the opponent's hand, then we're going to be able to unsuspend this Digimon. This works both during our turn and the opponent's turn, so they're really going to have to watch out when they're going to be adding cards to their hand and how they're going to be adding cards to their hand, if they even want to at all. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be 4 copies of the EX4 MachGaogamon. So this card isn't as good as the BT11 one, but it's still really good and still helps with the overall pressure and aggression for the deck. So when we digivolve into this card, we get to bounce a level 4 or lower Digimon back to the opponent's hand, which could trigger some of our various other abilities while acting as a good control tool and setting up the opponent's hand with an extra card. Then on top of that, the inheritable ability, again, is the most important aspect of this card. It's not as good as the other MachGaogamon, but it's still pretty close to being good, where it's a when attacking ability where if the opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, we get to unsuspend this Digimon, so this forces us to be a little bit more aggressive, but we still have the ability to unsuspend our Digimon to use both offensively and defensively. And then when it comes to the level 6s, I'm going to be running 1 copy of UlforceVeedramon. So right now we don't really have a good supporting level 6 for the deck, so I'm just going to be using a really good generic card that's still interacting with bouncing cards back to the opponent's hand and cares about our tamers, because again, we still want to try to set them up and play them as best as we possibly can. So this card just accomplishes all of those roles and checks all of those boxes, because when we digivolve into this card, we get to play a blue tamer from our hand for free, which is just really good at being able to set up our tamers without us needing to do anything else. Then on top of that, it has another ability where when we play a blue tamer, we get to unsuspend this Digimon, so that way we could be again offensive with this card and try to line up some multiple attacks, or defensive and leave it up as a blocker with our MachGaogamon. Then it also has a third ability where when this card becomes unsuspended, we get to bounce a level 3 Digimon back to the opponent's hand, and the range of this card increases by 1 level for each blue tamer we have in play. So the more blue tamers we have in play, the stronger of a bounce effect this will be when it's going to be unsuspending. But the main mega of the deck is going to be 4 copies of MirageGaogamon. So MirageGaogamon is actually a highly underrated card on how good this card is. So when we digivolve into this card, we get to bounce a level 5 or lower Digimon back to the opponent's hand, and if they don't have a Digimon for us to bounce, then we basically get to burn their security, except the security is going to be going into their hand, which again still triggers a lot of our abilities that care about hand size and adding cards into the opponent's hand. Then on top of that, it has a nice all turns ability that's going to help both be aggressive and disruptive at the same time, just because when a card is added into the opponent's hand, we get to gain a memory for every 4 cards in their hand, so it really forces the opponent to watch what they're doing on their turn. Otherwise, they could fall victim to MirageGaogamon accidentally anti-tempoing them, while increasing ours during our turn when we're trying to be aggressive with our cards, and allows us to make our plays even more tempo efficient than they normally would be. And then when it comes to the level 7s, we do have a lot of different level 7s that we could think about utilizing, but I'm going to be using 1 copy of Omnimon from BT5 just because of the when Digivolving abilities to unsuspend this Digimon, paired up with the when Digivolving ability of Blitz to try to act as an alternative win condition, getting an extra swing out of nowhere. Next, on to the Tamers, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Davis. So Davis right now is just the best generic blue memory fixing tamer that we have to try to make sure that we have at least 3 memory to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. Then on top of that, it also still is really good, acting as a good consistency tool with its on-play ability to be able to check the top 3 for a blue or green Digimon and add them to their hand. Since we don't have any green Digimon, we're just going to be adding a blue Digimon into our hand, which is all of the Digimon in the deck outside of Omnimon. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Thomas. So Thomas is going to be a really good card, not only just as an easy tamer for us to want to play, because his on-play ability is just letting us draw a card, so he's essentially just replacing himself for some good cycling, but allows our MirageGaogamon to be as aggressive as it possibly can, with us being able to have an alternative way to be able to unsuspend our Gao-based Digimon, as long as the opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Nicolai. So Nicolai is adding some extra protection for when we're being aggressive with our Gao-based cards, just because he's going to be giving our Gao-based cards jamming at the start of our main phase. Then on top of that, this card's also going to be helping with the overall efficiency, allowing us to be able to gain a memory when we're going to be adding cards into the opponent's hand. And then when it comes to the options, I'm running a pretty simple yet effective option lineup of 1 copy of Ice Wall because, well, it's Ice Wall trying to shut off the opponent's ability to want to attack for the entire turn. 2 copies of Blue Memory Boost, just because, again, it's Blue Memory Boost. It's another really good consistency card with the secondary main ability of Delay for us to gain 2 memory at a later turn. And then 3 copies of Cocytus Breath as just one of the best generic bounce effects for trying to remove the opponent's threats. And we want to run this on a slightly higher number just because we're trying to also use the fact that this is also a really good security threat, which could matter depending on our board state and setup, especially if we have a MirageGaogamon sitting on our field. Then this could trigger our MirageGaogamon to do even more devastating things than what's just normally printed on Cocytus Breath. And then when it comes to the overall game plan and gameplay of the deck goes, it is a fairly simple and straightforward deck, and there's not really too many convoluted combos that we need to be aware of, and most of it is just all dependent on how our tamer's set up and what types of abilities we see when we're building up our stack to try to make our Digimon as powerful and impactful as we can make them when we're making our big push turns. So when it comes to the level 3s, it really doesn't matter which level 3 we utilize in the raising as long as we just have a level 3. The off level 3s are probably okay to use in the raising. I'm using the floodgates, and whatever floodgate isn't super useful, I'm not afraid of throwing it into the raising area and digivolving on top of it because I want to prioritize the floodgate that would be useful to try to sit passively on the field. Then when it comes to the Digimon we actually want to try to utilize more often than not, it is going to be our inline cards, and that's kind of going to be the sentiment going forward, is we just really want to use the inline cards because they're the ones that are going to be synergizing with each other to make our options and play lines as impactful as we possibly can. So the one that I'm going to want to prioritize out of the 2 Gaomons that we have is going to be the EX4 one, just because the tempo that we could gain off of this card and the level 4 is too good to pass up on, so that way when we go into our high stage Digimon, we can make them as efficient as we possibly can. can. They both have some pretty good on-play abilities, so that way we could still utilize them if we want to try to set up our secondary stack on the field to still try to help with the overall consistency of the deck as well. So for this example, I'm just going to be using the EX4 Gaomon, as that's the one that I prioritize more often than not to be in my raising area. And then when it comes to the level 4s, it really doesn't matter which level 4 you're going to be digivolving into. The one you want to use the least is going to be Kumamon or whatever your respective hybrid is, because we're going to want to save this as the alternative win condition when the opponent's security is all broken. Then if we have enough memory, we could just digivolve into hybrid on top of a tamer that's unsuspended and swing for game, which is why it really doesn't matter which hybrid you're going to be using. But when it comes to the level 4s we actually want to use, we do have the two Gaogamons that are both very good at just trying to help with the memory generation to try to make our cards as efficient as we possibly can. So if we have a Nicolai set up, then we could utilize the Gaogamon from BT11 to be able to swing, gain that memory, use Nicolai to be able to give him jamming, and then be able to use the fact that he has jamming to be as aggressive as we possibly can, gain that memory, and then digivolve into our level 5 and hopefully have enough memory to then be able to digivolve into a level 6 with. So that's how you're going to want to mostly use the BT11 Gaogamon, and the EX4 Gaogamon is just a little bit easier to use generically, which is going to be the primary Gaogamon we want to use, mostly because of that memory generation when we just digivolve into our level 5 or our level 6. And then speaking of our level 5s, again, it really doesn't matter which level 5 we're going to want to use. I think that the BT11 is a little bit more generically good based on the types of cards that we're going to be playing around with on our level 6s, just because gaining blocker and that extra DP is very, very powerful, on top of the fact that the unsuspend works on all turns. But again, the EX4 one is still just pretty good and has its own native synergy with the deck, just because if we are able to bounce something, which the BT11 one can't do, then we can make our plays super tempo efficient by being able to gain decent memory off of our inheritables. So for this example, you usually, when going into your level 5s, want to raise out and then digivolve into your level 5 to hopefully then digivolve into your level 6 to be able to get your level 6 out as effectively as you possibly can, which is why having a memory setting tamer is really important to be able to accomplish this. When it comes to the level 6s, it really doesn't matter which one we want to use. Obviously, MirageGaogamon is going to be the preferred one just because of all the Gao-based synergy that we're going to be playing around with. But if you don't have MirageGaogamon, then UlforceVeedramon is still just a pretty good one to use as a substitute while we wait for the MirageGaogamon, and it still has some pretty powerful and potent abilities for us to use while setting ourselves up for our MirageGaogamon that we're eventually going to want to go into. But MirageGaogamon, the fact that he's always going to be able to add a card back into the opponent's hand unless they don't have any security at all, is still very, very powerful because he's always going to be triggering the inheritables off of all of our Gao-based level 3 through level 5s, so that way we could be as effective with our cards as we possibly can, because when we add that card, we're going to be gaining memory off of the level 3 and level 4, and then we're also going to be able to unsuspend with our level 5, which if we have Nicolai, again, we could use the fact that we have jamming to be able to swing with the BT11 MachGaogamon, and then be able to use the unsuspend off of the level 5 going into our level 6 to be able to unsuspend them, so that way we could get an extra swing with. And then that's kind of where Thomas comes in handy, is even more aggressiveness because we could get even more unsuspend effects. So the more Thomases that we have, the more aggressive we could potentially be. So that's kind of just how the gist of the deck works when it comes to our level 6s. And the level 7 is in here just as an alternative win condition, with Cocytus Breath being a really good disruptive option. And when it comes to understanding the core or foundation of the deck, to be able to edit it from there and to prep yourself for more support come BT13, here's a nice 36 card core, just mainly focusing on the two evolution lines from EX4 and BT11. But while we wait for the new cards to come, we still do have lots of other tech and tools that we could think about incorporating, all depending on what your own personal play preferences are, your accessibility to what cards you have, on top of the given meta that you're expected to play against. So if you wanted to, we do have some really cute alternative level 3s that we could run that are all just generically good depending on what you're focusing on. So if you're focusing on Unsuspend, we could use Veedramon to gain some extra memory. If you're focusing on jamming just because we do have Nicolai, then Labramon is really good at helping us gain memory that way, and we could even pair that with Wanyamon just because we could shove sources underneath and give her jamming as well if we need to. Then we do have Bluekamon as another generically good rookie for us to use, and following that security sub-theme, we also have Quadramon as just a way to be able to help get an extra body out while add extra consistency into the deck in case we're stuck at some point. But we do also have some other really cute cards that we could run, like utilizing Jellymon just because we're already synergizing and wanting to play with blue tamers, and it also doubles down on the bouncing that we could potentially do against the opponent when cards are being added into our hand, which we do have a decent amount of searching tools that are cheap enough for us to use to make use of this ability. Then on top of that, with Jellymon, we do also have the cute combo play of Starling Thunder to be able to potentially bounce the opponent's tamers back to their hand, but if we do just want to double down on just some generic bouncing, then we do have Veedramon from the starter deck as just another way to be able to bounce cards back into the opponent's hand, more specifically the low-level Digimon, and we could lean into some sub-V support as well. Then when it comes to the ultimates, we do have the old BT4 MachGaogamon, more so for the inheritable ability to gain some extra DP, but the Digiburst could help, especially if our stacks aren't very good at all for us to use or gain benefits from. Then when it comes to just some other really good generic cards, we do have Veedramon, especially if you're leaning into the Veemon support or the jamming support, as just another good card to use, and the inheritable of Security Attack Plus could help put some extra pressure onto the opponent. Then when it comes to the other level 6s that we could potentially use, the two secondary best ones are going to be the old BT4 MirageGao, but another card that we could think about leaning into is going to be Garurumon, because it's still trying to interact with the fact that we're trying to bounce cards to the opponent's hand while playing around with tamers. Then when it comes to the level 7s, we do just have a whole bunch of level 7s that we have access to. We could run various Omnimons, or if you don't even want to Digivolve into level 7s, we even have the infamous Death-Exmon as just another good tech card for us to utilize. Then we do have some various other options when it comes to various bounce effects that we want. We do want to prioritize utilizing bounce effects when it comes to our removal, and we don't want to try to put the opponent's Digimon to the bottom of their deck because we're not gaining any benefits from that. And then on top of that, we do just have a slew of different utility options in the form of Hammer Spark and plugins to, again, do various different things depending on what you're trying to tech for. And then we do have some other really decent tamers in blue that we could lean into, again, depending on the types of setup and cards that you are going to be playing around with and trying to interact with. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.